Hey everybody, Jeremy here from Nobot Studios. I'm back again with another Grit Fantasy RPG video. Today's topic, the Mighty D4. Now, just what is this Mighty D4 I speak of? Well, it's something that I stumbled upon during the last 2 years of developing and playtesting Grit Fantasy RPG, and it worked so well that it stuck. Even some of my players are using this on a regular basis now. So the primary use of the Mighty D4 is to take this little D4 die and use it to respond to players' questions that require a binary answer. So that's basically yes, no, good, bad, lost, found, even things like left or right. Now I know what some of you out there may be thinking, especially those who have run games for a long time or players who have been at it for a while, that this is not a new or innovative idea, and you are certainly right to think that. I'm sure this has lived in the homebrew space for as long as RPGs have been around, but I do feel that it's probably less common for it to be written into the rules of an RPG book, and that's exactly what I did with Grit Fantasy RPG. So there are multiple uses for this tool, and I'm going to go over some of those in this video. So I'd like to take a moment to go to the left-hand side here and look at the rule book, which I have pulled up. And we're going to go into the section that's in the GM's guide that covers the Mighty D4. This just kind of highlights a little bit of what you can do with it. And there are more things in this. And I'm going to go over kind of the GM side of things as well as the player side of things, because players can use this too. So like I said before, whenever a situation requires a quick binary answer, simply roll a D4 die and let the result decide. A really nice thing about this is that the D4 die, if it's left open on the table or on the virtual tabletop, takes the pressure off the GM, and it makes it less personal and just more about just generating this random answer of how things are going to go in the game. So, like it's written here, this is a fast and fair way to answer questions and determine details while running your games. So I have a breakdown in the first table here of how this works. So basically 1 and 2 is like bad, and 3 and 4 is good. So 1 and 2, it shows no, bad, lost, broken, and so on. 3 and 4 is yes, good, found, intact, and so on. So list can go on and on. So that's the basic use of it. So just to answer player questions. One of the biggest things that I noticed that happened with this once it was developed and when I started using it a lot is that it absolutely, once again, I've created something that reduces prep and notes for your games. So I think as GMs, sometimes we get into this struggle with coming up with hypothetical situations that we have to have answers for written down in our notes, and that just clogs everything up. Because honestly, you can't really prepare for every single hypothetical situation that'll happen in your games, because the players are going to come up with creative ideas that are going to throw you through a loop. Obviously, you want to have some main points written down, but I think this drastically reduces the amount of prep that you have to make for your games, and you can just sort of enter your games with this very minimal amount of information and just go with the flow and just let this D4 die kind of decide what's happening, it's so great. It makes everything just flow. Okay, so another thing too is that you can use the Mighty D4 for monster and NPC actions and reactions. So instead of having this kind of idea of, how these things are going to interact in the game, you can use the Mighty D4 to see sort of what they're going to do. So like, does the monster flee or fight? Do they give chase or do they stay? How many are there? That kind of stuff. And I want to kind of go back to the player questions a little bit too, because it could be things as simple as that, kind of tie into prepping the game, is that, you don't need to have all the answers for everything written down. So like if a player asks you, is a chest locked? Like you don't have to have that in your notes, right? You could just roll the Mighty D4, and if it's a 3 or 4, yes, it's locked. Another question could be, is a guard standing watch at the gate? Roll a 1 or 2? No, there's not a guard there. Easy to go in, right? Another thing could be like, is there something I can use to smash the door with? Like, is there something in the room that I could use here? And again, Mighty D4, boom, done. You don't have to have that written in your notes that there's something in that room. You could just use this die to kind of create it on the fly, right? So you're kind of like prompting to players to come up with these questions, or they get used to asking questions and having the die used to kind of answer those questions and create things on the fly. So it's a really great thing. Another main one is environmental things or events, right? And it kind of ties into what I just talked about with like something being in the room that you can use to smash a door with. Like, see, maps that you set down don't always have all the information out there. There's a lot that is just sort of left open. So if players kind of get the idea that they can sort of come up with ideas on the fly or see if there's something there on the fly, then you can use this D4 to like see if there's something there that's helpful. So maybe a player asks, is there a rope that I can use to like swing over this pit? And you roll 3 or 4 on the Mighty D4. Yes, there is a rope that's kind of just hanging there, left over from some mining equipment. It opens up that creative kind of spark, that moment, right? Another thing is there anything flammable in this, workshop, this alchemist workshop, that I can use as a bomb? Roll the Mighty D4. 1 or 2, no, you don't really see anything that's there. Or 3 or 4, yes, there is this thing that you could definitely use to start a fire with. Maybe there's this pit trap, and you forgot to like prep. Okay, well, what's in the pit? Are there spikes? Are there water? Or is there water? Or, is there another tunnel leading underneath there? You can use the Mighty D4 to kind of generate that. So it works really well for environmental stuff. Another thing that can be used for this is critical roles. Now, I know critical roles are just an optional rule in Grit Fantasy RPG. It's not a hard rule, but if you opt to use it, a roll of a natural 1 would result in some kind of bad thing, right? So you could use the Mighty D4 to kind of curb that, right? So you could, if a player rolls a natural 1 while attacking, and you roll a D4, you can kind of tailor sort of what happens there. Like if it's a 3 or 4, maybe it's just nothing happens, just a fail. Maybe a 1 or 2, the item is broken or lost or something happens or more damage. Who knows? You can also use that on a natural 12, I'm sure. That would maybe work against the enemies. Okay. Another thing that you can use for the Mighty D4 for is timers. So if you kind of spend any time looking through the GM rules about anything that has timers, every single thing in the book is a D4. There's no timer that's longer than D4. And I did that on purpose. The game moves quickly, rounds move fast. A D4 is the perfect amount. Anything more is too long. Okay, so timers are always D4 if there is a D4 die roll that's associated with it. Another thing that's actually listed on this page here, I didn't tell you the page number 40, page 41, is the second table. So if you have a hard time figuring out, what difficulty to make a static roll set at, you can simply roll the Mighty D4, and this gives you what it should be. So you roll the Mighty D4 and you roll a 3. It's a hard roll to make. So they have to beat a 9 or exceed a 9. Okay, so this could be super easy if you're kind of in a bind and you're not quite sure, what this action should be. As far as difficulty, boom, Mighty D4 gets it done in a second. Okay. I do want to bring up another use that I just came up with the last session that I ran. I'm currently playtesting Grit Galaxies, which is the sci-fi version. And I had kind of these NPC characters with 1 grit and these zombie versions of them that had 1 grit. And basically they were combating each other. And so what I did, instead of rolling attack rolls and reaction rolls, I just rolled a Mighty D4 for the pairs because they were all paired up fighting. So if it was a 1 or 2, the bad guys won. If it was a 3 or 4, the good guys won. So, and because they had 1 grit each, that one roll just eliminated one or the other. So it was super fast and it worked so well. So you can do these really creative things with the Mighty D4. Another thing that I do too is kind of a percentage. So instead of pulling out my 2d10s and rolling a percentage, I just do either 50% or a 25%. So like usually it's like a 1. So if it's a bad situation, if I roll a 1, something bad happens. Or if something a character's really trying to achieve something and out of the ordinary, I will say, let's roll a Mighty D4. If it hits a 4, then it happens. And this is beyond what like a normal roll would kind of help with. It goes beyond the normal rolls. Sometimes the things come up. It's not often, but it's just an idea of how to use it. Now, to kind of move into the player side of things, a lot of times it can be just used to make quick decisions. Because sometimes players get in these binds, and I've been there myself, where you're just like not sure what to do in that moment. It could be some kind of pivotal thing that's happening, like you have to choose between saving your friend who is like about to like fall off the edge of a cliff, they're holding on by their fingers, or to fight and kill do the killing blow to the final boss, something like that, where it's just like, what do I do? Mighty D4 it. 1 or 2, no, you don't help your friend, and you fight the baddie. That's simple. And what this does is it like totally speeds up the game. There's no like analysis paralysis you have to worry about. It's like, boom, this is what's happening. Okay. Another thing I wanted to talk about with the player side of things is that artifacts, some of them have timers associated with them, and this relates to the timers I talked about with the GM. But if you spend any time looking through the artifacts in the book, you will notice that every single thing that has a timer is a D4 die. And again, I did this on purpose because the game moves so quickly that the D4 is just perfectly suited for that. So Mighty D4 for all timers of artifacts. And another thing that I noticed too that players started using is like for critical rolls themselves. So they do this self-nerfing thing, which is basically how I describe critical role and how the Mighty D4 can fit with that. But I just find that some of the players do that themselves, which totally helps me. It's one less thing I have to do, and totally cool that they do that. So yeah, that's really kind of wraps up, both the GM and player side. I do have some examples here on this page, page 41, that I just kind of want to read through just to get that out there. So the first example, is there, the player says, is there a window on the upper floor of this tower? And the GM rolls the Mighty D4 and gets a 2. It looks like the section of the tower does not have windows. So something as simple as that. That's more of an environmental thing. Second one, the player says, do I find the dart I threw at the goblin earlier? And the GM just rolls out the Mighty D4, gets a 3. After quickly searching, you find the dart stuck in a pillar in the center of the room. So this is a thing that can happen with thrown weapons or dropped weapons. Can I find that afterwards? Especially with like daggers or darts, things like that. Okay, throwing knives. So that's really handy there. Third example, Grim attacks the orc with his sword and rolls a natural 1. The GM takes the Mighty D4 and rolls a 1 and says, your blade gets lodged into his shield and the momentum breaks the sword at its hilt. So there you go. It just, the Mighty D4 came up with that simple solution. Okay. And the fourth and final one, the player says, I want to pick the lock to the treasure room. And the GM's like, oh man, I don't know how to, calculate this difficulty. So they roll a Mighty D4 and rolls a 4 to determine the difficulty level. So with some inspection, you realize it's a very complex lock. The difficulty is absurd, which means you have to roll a 12 or you have to exceed a 12 on your roll. So to kind of summarize, I think, just to say at the end here with all this, what I sometimes do is, I guess it's not really a summary, but I like to say like a 1 or 2 is a no but, so there's still some kind of description that you're speaking of, even though it's a failure. And then a 3 or 4 would be yes and, right? And that's not a uncommon thing. That's something that's out there. So just maybe add a little bit more than just yes or no. Just fill in extra details as you go, and it can be really fun. So kind of to wrap this, I want to challenge the GMs out there who are like starting to set up and run games of Grit. Prep 1 page of notes for your game or less, and really lean into this D4, this Mighty D4. Okay, I think you're going to find you really like it, and it frees up your games quite a bit, and it makes your prep that much easier. I mean, if you're using all the builders and you're incorporating the Mighty D4, you can really get games to the table quickly and without stress. And that is one of the main things about the Mighty D4, is to not be stressed, because it will simply answer questions for you that you don't know, and it's okay not to know. All right. So, yeah, that is the Mighty D4. Please use it. I'd love to hear it, how this works out for you. So leave comments in the YouTube feed here, or questions you might have. I'd love to hear from you. And that's really all I have to say about the Mighty D4. It's one of my favorite things about Grit now, and I will probably take it with me into other systems if I'm playing those. So use it, and thanks for stopping by and watching this video, and I appreciate you all following along, and I hope you're out there gaming and having fun, and roll those dice.